so much tell stories as paint pretty pictures. And they're really good at that. So it was difficult to find French songs that actually told a story. Sometimes what I would have to do when I was looking was figure, okay, is there an implied story? Can we run with that? So they're very big into less is more in terms of details and occasionally in terms of music. Especially in the 1890s when you get to the symbolist movement, things are a little bit more subtle in the piano part and the voice line is very sort of whimsical almost. And then we have three very different composers that are all composing around the same period: Korsell, Fauré, and Duparc. They're all sort of turn-of-the-century composers, but very different styles. Korsell was eclectic in inspiration and musical technique. He was well known and prolific in his time, but nobody knows him anymore. He had a ton of compositions. He had over 200 opus numbers for songs, and he also worked on symphonic poems and program music, specifically the Jungle Book. He was a big fan of the Jungle Book. And he also was a little obsessed with Hollywood and Hollywood actresses to the point that they asked him to stop composing pieces dedicated to them. So there's that. But the song I'm doing is called L'été, and it's from a collection of rondels, which is a type of poem. The form is described in your program by Parnassian poet Theodore de Banville. And the interesting thing about this Parnassian movement is that, unlike the Romantics that had free form and design, they wanted order, they wanted precision, they wanted everything to be exact. And so a rondel has a very, very specific order to it, with repeated lines that actually work quite well in L'été, but other songs, not so much. So Korsell was a big fan of his own rondels. He often quoted himself later on in the third person. I have two quotes for you that he spoke in 1939 that are just, they give you a little insight into his character. The first one, he said, "One must have lived through the period of the Wagner cult to see how much independence there is in these little but lively rondels. On reflection, it seems that they already anticipate the reaction against Wagner of Les Six and the École d'Arcueil." So Les Six were a group of French composers at this time, and you can tell from that little quote he was not a fan of Wagner. The second quote elaborates a little bit more. He continues saying, "The rondels, as if to shake off the cults of Wagner and Franck, preserve a sense of balance, precision, and concision. He," meaning himself, because he wrote in the third person, "he was always rather unconventional, inclined to be openly opposed to fashion. The rondels, quite slender compared with the ring cycle, have the merit of remaining natural and familiar, exempt from exaggeration, and, in particular, free from the pessimism of Tristan." So, he thought quite a bit about himself. But I think you will enjoy L'été for its simplicity of line and its sort of charming nature. The poem, called The Tea in English, is actually about a teapot. So there's this whole poem describing these fishbowl and these chimeras and a big angry red sky, and all they're doing is describing the teapot. So it seems there's more depth to it, but really there's not. And it's just kind of funny that the whole story has to be kind of figured out in your head. You assume these two women are having tea and they're describing this fishbowl. So then you wonder, why are they having tea? Do they always have tea? Do they always talk about the fishbowl? Is this a new China, teapot? What's going on? And then we move on to Fauré, who was a master of the French mélodie. He was also extremely prolific. He wrote Au Bordelot in 1875 while he was still under the influence of his teacher, Gounod. Although this was one of the first few of his songs where you could actually see the composer he was going to become. This work actually alluded to it more than others did. He was kind of a cool guy because he composed for the pleasure of it, which I think is just great. Instead of having a big requiem and dedicating it to so-and-so, He composed just because he wanted to. The alternating long and short lines of the Parnassian poem that this song is based on changed the pace of the story. So while we're walking along with these two lovers as they're describing the scene, we're saying, we're listening to how, the water murmurs, listen to it murmur. The clouds in the sky are gliding by, watch it glide. And so we've got this like movement of the story and then stop, and then movement and then stop. And so similar to some of the other composers we've heard today, a lot more is implied than actually spoken. Then finally, we go on to Duparc, if I can turn my page. He was also unique in the sense that he only wrote 17 mélodies, 17 songs in his lifetime. He probably wrote more than that, but in 1885, at the age of 37, he was diagnosed with neurasthenia, a mental illness, which caused him to abruptly stop composing. In fact, music became repugnant to him, and he destroyed almost all of his works, including the opera Rusalka, which Au pays où se fait la guerre, what I will be singing today, was from, which means how in the world do we have a copy of it? Because he destroyed it. But I'm glad we do have a copy of the song at least. He also believed that God imposed a moral transformation on him, and that obliterated his past life. So once he moved on, he was moved on. However, when he was still composing, he, like Goethe, loved to contrast images of purity and sensuality. For example, in the song I will be singing, the character reminisces about how her lover has gone to war, and there's this sort of pure ideal of a fairy tale princess in her tower, and then all of a sudden she remembers his goodbye kiss and how he took the soul out of her mouth. So we've got this pure moment and then a little bit more sensual. And then she also describes her love as being full like a lily. So we have the innocence of a lily and then sort of the implied innuendo underneath, which I think makes this song a little bit more special. I hope you enjoy the selection of French composers.